Alright gang, here we go with a chili recipe for guys who don't know how to cook. I like to use a big cast iron pot for my chili. You can use any other type of pot you want, but this is the one that I like to use. I'm going to heat this pot up on my oven to a medium-high temperature. This has a setting of 1 through 10. I've got it on number 7, and I'm going to let the pot heat up now. So the pot's getting pretty warm at this point, and I'm going to add some olive oil inside the pot. And next, I'm going to throw in about a cup of diced onions. And I demonstrated my dicing technique, poor as it is, during my video where I was making, what did I make in that video? Whatever the first one was that I made. I showed dicing an onion. Anyway, I'm going to stir this around a little bit so the onions get coated with the olive oil. I'll throw a little bit more on there. And I'm just going to let them caramelize in the olive oil while I start to get some other things ready. And while I'm waiting on the onions, I will add the same comment that I made during the last video where I was using diced onions. It was my meatloaf, that's what it was, my meatloaf recipe. If you don't like onions, you don't have to put them in. The nice thing about cooking this stuff is you can put in what you do like and you don't have to put in what you don't like. You can also use diced peppers if you want to and throw those in here. But again, I'm just going to let this get a little darker before I go to the next step. So I'll give it another minute or so. Alright, the onions are looking pretty good, so I'm going to add the next ingredient, which is going to be 1 pound of ground beef. And as I've said before, you don't have to use ground beef. You can use any kind of ground meat. This can be ground venison, it can be ground turkey, it can be ground pork, whatever. And I'm also going to add some salt and pepper at this point. And spices, of course, are going to be to your taste. You can add more or less, depending on what you like. And now I'm going to break up my ground beef and mix it around with my onions. And now I'm just going to brown the ground beef. I'm going to wait till it's basically cooked before I go to the next step. And while the beef was browning, I took the opportunity to get my appropriate cooking beverage. Again, this is a little bit of bourbon. And people always ask me what bourbon I'm drinking. This is Jim Beam, although I think my favorite is Maker's Mark. I don't have any of that right now, but I got some Jim Beam, so that is my cooking beverage that I'm enjoying while I'm working on my chili. And my beef is browned, my onions are caramelized. Now it's time to add some more ingredients, but first I'm going to turn the temperature down a little bit, down to a lower medium temperature, because it doesn't need to be that hot anymore. And I'm going to add 1 can of chili beans. And some people like to drain their beans so that there's no juice or anything left inside the can. I do not. I like to add that right to the chili. So 1 can of chili beans, 1 can of kidney beans. And if there are either one of these you don't like, obviously you don't have to add them. You can use a different kind. Now I'm going to add 1 can of tomato sauce. This is Cento tomato sauce, which is pretty good stuff. And I'm just going to pour that in. Now I'm going to get about 2/3 of a can, or this can, full of water and add that in as well. And here is my 2/3 of a can of water. So we'll add that in. Now I'm going to stir everything around. Next is about a 1/4 cup of chili powder, and I'm just going to pour that in too. and stir it around. Now you see at this point this is kind of thin, but that's okay because I'm now going to leave this on the oven, or on the stovetop rather, on a low heat for the next several hours. And I'm just going to let it get good and warm, probably start to boil a little bit, and then I'm going to turn the heat down to just a simmer, and it's going to stay there. Right now it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to eat this about 6 o'clock or so this afternoon. So it's just going to sit and cook for that amount of time, and the liquid is going to cook down and the flavors are going to start to meld together. Now it is a good idea to taste your chili while it's simmering periodically to check the seasoning and see if you need a little more salt, a little more chili powder, or whatever, just to season it to your taste. I have to be a little bit careful because Miss Mimi does not like hot spicy food, so I need to make sure this doesn't get too spicy for her. Between the chili powder and the chili beans that I've added, that's probably going to be just about enough for her. Now for me, I like it to be as hot and spicy as I can get it. So by the time I'm done, when I put this in a bowl, I'm going to be adding some jalapeno peppers to it, and maybe even 1 or 2 other things just to make it a little bit hotter. So as you can see, I have the chili back at a boil, and I did raise the heat on the stovetop a little bit. I brought it back up to number 7 out of 10, so a high medium setting, and it's already starting to get thicker. You can see that. So now I'm going to turn the temperature down. I think I'll take it down to number 2. That's the next to the lowest setting. I'm going to put a lid on this, and it's just going to sit there and cook for about the next 4.5 hours or thereabouts. I guess make that 3.5 hours. And something odd happened. Apparently I had my bourbon too close to the stovetop, and you can see that it almost completely evaporated just from the heat. So I'm going to have to get a little bit more bourbon and sit down and relax while I'm waiting for this to finish cooking. And I'll show you the finished product, because the last time when I made the meatloaf, I got yelled at by a lot of people for not showing you the finished product. Alright gang, it's been about 4 hours, and I hope you can see how thick this is. It has cooked down wonderfully. And I'm going to put some in a bowl. There we go. And what I'm going to do is put some shredded white cheddar cheese on top, just like that. And also I'm going to put some pickled jalapenos, just like that. So there we go. There is my chili recipe for guys who don't know how to cook.